This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, it was quite a dour start to the fourth quarter for emerging markets today. Investors continue to worry about slowing growth and, of course, a rising inflation. Now, MSCI's emerging market stock index fell 0.4% on the day for the third time this week, as, of course, data shows weakening manufacturing activity across Asia, as well as indications of slowing growth in China. Now, the index is set for a weekly decline of about 1.2%. In Africa, quite a quiet day in Nigeria as the country celebrates Independence Day. South Africa's JSE saw both the all-share and top 40 decline today, right along with its global peers, as inflation fears continue to weigh on sentiment. Now, the resource index was down 8%, with industrials following not too far behind. Now, also coming up on today's show, a look at the newly launched Pan-African Payment Settlement System. Maersk unveils an oral drug for the coronavirus that reduces the chance of hospitalization by around 50%. And South Africa's Mpumalanga province to soon boast the highest skywalk in the world. Well, we start off today's show in South Africa. The country is introducing COVID-19 vaccine passports. The passports will be used as proof of vaccination for various purposes and events. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa says an immunized adult population is key to fully reopening the country's economy and also avoiding a fourth wave of infections. In a televised national address, Ramaphosa also announced that the country has further eased lockdown restrictions. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela with more.
Under the adjusted level 1 lockdown, the curfew moves to between 12 p.m. and 4 a.m. More people are now allowed to attend indoor and outdoor gatherings.
The maximum number of people permitted for attending meetings indoors will increase from 250 to 750. And the maximum number of people permitted to attend meetings outdoors will increase from 500 to 2,000. Where the venue is too small to accommodate these numbers with appropriate social distancing, then no more than 50% of the capacity of the venue may be utilized. This includes religious services, political events, social gatherings, as well as restaurants, bars, taverns, and similar places.
The easing down of these restrictions come just a few weeks before the country holds local elections. The president also announced that COVID-19 vaccine passports will now be effected.
The Department of Health will soon be rolling out a vaccination certificate, which will provide a secure and a verifiable proof of vaccination. This certificate can be used to facilitate travel, to access establishments and gatherings and other forms of activity that require proof of vaccination status.
Ramaphosa also tackled the issue of South Africa's red listing by the United Kingdom. South Africa is currently one of 54 nations from which arrivals to the UK must enter hotel quarantine. The UK says South Africa is on the red list because of the beta COVID-19 variant. This is despite the fact that the Delta variant is the most common variant both in South Africa and globally.
I had a telephone conversation with the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, to discuss this matter. I put South Africa's case to him, which he understood very well. And we both agreed that decisions of this nature should be informed by science, and we are both hopeful of a positive outcome when the issue comes up for review in the coming days.
In its efforts to accelerate the vaccination campaign, government will embark on the Vuma Vaccination Weekends campaign. The countrywide drive is to encourage South Africans to get vaccinated. Despite the positive outlook, health experts are warning that the fourth wave could be on the horizon, especially with the upcoming local elections in November. Yulisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Export-Import Bank and the African Continental Free Trade Agreement Secretariat earlier in the week announced the rollout of the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. Now, this platform will enable instant cross-border payments in local currencies between African markets by simplifying cross-border transactions and reducing the dependency on hard currencies. It is also expected to boost intra-African trade significantly and also underpin the implementation of the AfCFTA deal. Well, joining us on the line now to discuss how significant PAPS is for AfCFTA is Mike Okbalu. He's the CEO of PAPS. Great to have you on the show with us today, Mr. Okbalu. Now, the system, it has already had a successful pilot phase in the countries of the West African Monetary Zone. So what did that period and the period since your launch on Thursday reveal about the take-up of this system, and certainly give us some insight into the data around the transactions concluded so far? Well, it looks like we lost Mr. Okbalu there. Certainly we'll try and get him back for you later in the show. In the meantime, the creation of the African Continental Free Trade Area is a significant step in increasing intra-African trade, which of course is dismally low. Now, every nation on the continent can benefit from working cooperatively in that group. Here's Angelo Coppola, who spoke to Wamkele Mene, the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat. He was in South Africa recently. Take a look.
The export sector in South Africa is a case in point. Currently, it employs 250,000 people, and that's for exports to 15 Southern African Development Community member countries.
Can you imagine if we scale that to the whole of the continent and export goods to West Africa, North Africa? It will create jobs and it will stimulate South Africa's economy. So that's why this is so vitally important to the country.
MENA has been in place for a little over a year now, and there's a lot of work that still needs to be done before the benefits will flow. Customs procedures and infrastructure is the most critical component.
That will take about a year to set up an entire system for trading under AfCFTA. There are countries who are ready. Egypt is ready, Kenya is ready, Ghana is ready. They have their customs systems, but other countries will need to catch up so that this can finally take off in 2 to 3 years' time. That's what we want.
The time frame to get countries trading with each other and operating optimally is flexible.
We don't need the whole continent. We need to start with a critical mass of countries, 4, 5, 7 countries that will fully implement it. Even in Europe, 72 years ago, Europe, they started with only 6 countries, and then others over time joined in. And so I think we should expect that it will be similarly a gradual process to get everybody to be exporting and trading under the AfCFTA.
The key challenge facing the continent is lack of infrastructure. Without it, the chances of success are reduced.
There are pockets of success. There are some countries who are doing very, very well, but if we want to connect different regions of the continent, we have to invest in massive infrastructure development projects to connect East Africa with West Africa, trade corridors. These are things that will cost a lot of money, but we have to do them if we want this to succeed.
Once the African Continental Free Trade Area is up and running, it's going to benefit all the countries on the continent. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And Now let's turn our attention to some corporate headlines today. U.S. drug maker Merck & Co. has unveiled an antiviral pill called molnupiravir, which reduces the risk of hospitalization due to COVID-19 by 50% in an interim analysis of a late-stage trial. Now, the company says it has halted the study and plans to seek an emergency use authorization from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration as quick as possible. The firm also plans to submit applications to regulators in other countries. Meanwhile, the Central Bank of Nigeria says it has delayed the anticipated launch of its e-Naira digital currency. That's amid the country's Independence Day celebrations. Nigeria was set to follow China and others in adopting a central bank-backed digital currency as it looks to tap into the popularity of crypto and virtual money. The statement by CBN did not give details on when the e-Naira will be officially launched. And global oil and gas majors Eni and BP are now seeking to raise up to $2 billion for their emerging oil and gas joint venture in Angola. The companies are looking to reduce debt to aid in building up renewable ventures. Now, this comes amid plans by BP and Eni to form one of Africa's largest energy firms. And finally, Daimler AG shareholders have backed a plan to spin off the sprawling truck division from the Mercedes-Benz luxury car operations. The company adds that it will keep a 35% stake in the trucks division in a landmark corporate split with the hopes of boosting share values. Now, Daimler shares rose about 1.3% to $90.15 US in Frankfurt, valuing the manufacturer at around $96.4 billion. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's now head into a short break, but still coming up on the show. We look at why communities in Africa need support in the global fight against climate change. And a look at Ethiopia's bus rapid transit system that is helping to ease congestion in Addis Ababa.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Uche. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Well, let's turn our attention now to all things climate change. Now, Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg joined activists from around the world for Fridays for Future March in Italy, Milan, as environment ministers met ahead of Glasgow's COP26. Now, the young climate champions, inspired by Thunberg, marched peacefully through the streets of Milan to demand policymakers match rhetoric with action and stump up the billions of dollars needed to wean the world of fossil fuels to cleaner energy during a year, of course, that has seen record-breaking heat waves, floods and fires. Now, the proposals of the young activists include a transparent climate finance system, as well as sustainable and responsible tourism, and the phasing out of the fossil fuel industry by 2030, which of course they want to be included in the agenda for the November COP26 meeting. Meanwhile, Africa is one of the most vulnerable regions to climate change, and that's despite contributing minimally to the causes. Climate change, deforestation and watershed degradation have all exaggerated impacts from flooding and droughts, which coastal nations in particular are prone to. Now, the UK's Development Finance Institution, the CDC Group, advocates for more collaborations amongst the development finance and impact investment community on financing research, technology development and data to support African policymakers and their legislators and communities. The group is calling for women, youth and vulnerable groups to have access to climate risk assessment tools that strengthen local capacity. That is in addition to climate-smart agriculture as an essential route to increase agricultural production and incomes on the continent. Well, let's now take apart CDC's plans for Africa. We're joined by Dr. Amal Lee Amin. She's a climate change director at the CDC Group. Great to have you on the show with us, Dr. Amin. Now, of course, I want to start by asking you, when you take the pulse of Africa's climate action initiatives, what is your take currently on the progress made so far in terms of the market and, of course, policies put in place so far? Dr. Amin, can you hear me? Well, it looks like we are having technical issues today. In the meantime, as we try to get her back, let's turn our attention to Sudan. World Bank President David Malpass has been in Sudan for the first visit by the bank in nearly 40 years. Now, he praised the country's reforms, but cautioned against what he called political slippages. A transitional government and a civilian military sovereign council have been running in the African nation since 2019. That's after the ouster of longtime ruler Omar al-Bashir. Naba Mohidin has more from Khartoum.
Sudanese Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok welcomed the delegation and described the visit as a historic one.
We are very delighted and honored to see you coming to see us at this very historic moment in the country's history. We are also delighted that you have chosen to deliver your speech, annual speech for the world from our capital, Khartoum.
Under Bashir, Sudan endured decades of corruption and strict U.S. sanctions. The United States removed Sudan from its state sponsor of terrorism blacklist in December 2020, eliminating a major hurdle to much-needed aid and financial investment. The new government made solid economic reforms to meet the international financial institutions' requirements to access aid and investments. Malpass said Sudan's transitional government inherited a deeply damaged economy and society that has suffered decades of conflict and isolation. He said it faced extraordinary headwinds. He also praised the transitional government's economic reforms.
Sudan is building a nation, is going to be stronger than the individual parts. And that's important as people see the supply increase and the shortages go down. That can happen in other areas of the economy. And as that happens, investment will come. One of the things that strikes me is the availability of investment from Sudanese people who are living abroad. They're watching the developments. They are very pleased and very proud to see the country move toward a peaceful nation. And so we are here today to strongly encourage that process, recognizing that it's hard and that it takes time.
Sudan has over $50 billion in foreign debt. The tumbling economy is now awaiting debt relief through the so-called Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, HEPIC initiative, in order to recover. Naba Muhiddin, CGTN, Khartoum, Sudan.
Now, Africa is famous for its coffee, especially the Eastern African nation of Ethiopia, which produces a wide variety of coffee beans. Now, the channels bringing coffee from Africa to the world are opening up even more. And Yuli has the details from Changsha in central China's Hunan province on tonight's What's Hot.
China's coffee market has huge potential. The number of cups of coffee consumed per capita in China is 6.2 per year. That's about 85 billion cups total. The average annual growth rate of coffee consumption in China is 16% compared to the global rate of 2%. And at the China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo, there are many promising opportunities for coffee producers to break into the Chinese market.
Africa is one of the most important production areas of high-quality coffee in the world. We see a promising business opportunity to import African coffee beans into the Chinese market. There are also many high-quality coffee producers in Africa that lack channels for domestic sales.
Lei Ting is the founder of Overseas Home, a company that endeavors to connect businesses from China and African countries. The company has helped some 40 African coffee-producing exhibitors set up booths at this year's expo.
Because of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, they can't come to Changsha to participate in the expo in person. We assist African companies in transporting products to the exhibition site and organize professional personnel in China to help them find partners and local sales parties.
The coffee trade has grown steadily in China. Ethiopia exported 6,000 tons of coffee beans to China in 2020. And according to Lei, the number will grow to 10,000 tons this year. Achievements like this encourage African countries to establish deeper connections with China. Both Chinese and African companies see huge potential for business opportunities, with the expo serving as a bridge to connect them. Yu Li, CGTN, Changsha, Hunan Province.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now, but still coming up on the show. We give you a glimpse at what's on show at the Expo 2020 in Dubai. And China shows off some of its most advanced weapons and fighter jets at the country's largest air show.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Again, he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
The Excellency, thank you very much for your time. Now, what is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
And now here's a quick recap of other headlines this hour. Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, who led last month's coup in Guinea, has been sworn in as interim president. Now, Doumbouya, who led the overthrow of President Alpha Conde on September 5th, was sworn in for an unspecified transitional period. The interim president has promised to respect all the West African states' international commitments. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council will privately discuss a decision by Ethiopia to expel 7 UN officials. This comes as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed a shock over the expulsion of the UN officials who were accused of meddling in the country's internal affairs. In a statement, Guterres said UN staff are guided by impartiality and neutrality, and he expressed full confidence in them. And a number of Congolese citizens are now calling for justice for women who were allegedly sexually abused by workers of the World Health Organization and other aid agencies during an Ebola outbreak that occurred between 2018 and 2020. Now, their reaction comes in the wake of a damning report that identified more than 80 sexual abuse cases committed in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And finally, 2021 marks 50 years of diplomatic relations between China and Rwanda. Through platforms such as the second China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo, the two nations continue to deepen their ties. Now, Rwanda has been gradually expanding its exports to China, further globalizing its local markets. And that's a recap of other headlines this hour. Well, let's now get you some international news. October 1st is a major holiday in China. It marks a national day celebrating the anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. Now, a flag-raising ceremony was held earlier on Friday in Tiananmen Square in Beijing. The solemn moment attracted thousands of people to watch the annual tradition. Events are being held across the country as China begins a week-long holiday that runs through October 7th. Millions will be on the move, going on vacation or traveling to visit family. And let's now head to the United Arab Emirates, where Expo 2020 has kicked off in Dubai. It is the first World Fair to be held in the Middle East. It was opened on Thursday with a lavish ceremony attended by UAE officials and other dignitaries. Now, the event was delayed for a year because of the pandemic and has cost about $7 billion. It will last for 6 months and host exhibitors from almost 200 countries. Organizers hope the fair can draw tourists and businesses to Dubai and also help boost the city's economy. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping has conveyed his greetings on the opening of Expo 2020 Dubai. In a video message on Friday, President Xi said the Expo is a great event for countries to showcase their cultures and also strengthen dialogue and cooperation. He reiterated China's call for all countries to work towards building a community with a shared future for mankind. Meanwhile, the China Pavilion, also known as the Light of China, opened on Friday. More than 40 leading Chinese enterprises will hold exhibitions, forums, and other activities at the Expo through online and offline channels. Now, my colleague Michael Wang talked to our correspondent Aya Batrawi in Dubai to get some of the latest updates from the World Expo and the influences of the event on the UAE's development.
This is an expo that has been 8 years in the making. I remember being in Dubai in 2013, actually 8 years ago, when they won the bid for the expo. You know, it's really seen here in Dubai as a chance for Dubai to project itself on the world stage. But of course, you know, the coronavirus pandemic really just took over the world last year, and so the Expo 2020 was delayed till 2021. And today it is opening its doors to the public for the first time. Behind me, you can see buildings and structures, multi-million-dollar pavilions. But do keep in mind that behind me, just a few years ago, was barren desert. And so this is really what the Expo here in Dubai is all about. It's about showing Dubai's capacity to build and to really bring the world together in its East meets West kind of open for business model that Dubai is so proud of and projects to the world. And so we have our 192 pavilions and some really exciting attractions for the public. But the question is, will the public come amid this pandemic when so much of the world is virtual and so much of what is known as the World Fair now are things that the public has already seen, like the replica of a Falcon, SpaceX rocket at the US Pavilion, or like, an Egyptian mummy at the Egyptian Pavilion.
What kind of influence do you think will the World Expo have on the UAE's development, and what are your expectations of the Expo's major highlights in the next few days?
I mean, what the UAE hopes is that there will be 25 million visits to the Expo site. Now, how many of those are recurring visits, new visits, visitors from outside the country versus already existing residents? That's still unclear. Will this revive Dubai's, economy, which is so reliant on tourism? We still don't know as well. But what we do know is that the doors have opened. This is a 6-month-long event. Dubai has bet billions of dollars on its construction to try and make sure that this expo happens. And, it's brought 192 countries. And as you can see, the world's media behind me as well, just flooding today the expo site. But it's yet to be seen really if we're going to see the world, really coming to Dubai to take part in this expo and visit the 192 different countries that are represented here today.
And heading to the UK now, the government insists that fuel supplies are stabilizing now, but that it could be more than a week before things return to normal. Now, as Nicole Johnston now reports from London, there are still empty petrol stations and long queues across southeast England.
The British government says the fuel crisis is under control. This doesn't look like it. The Petrol Retailers Association says almost 30% of the stations they represent are dry, with no petrol or diesel left to sell. But it's a mixed picture across the country.
We've spoken to sites in Wales, for example, in Scotland and Northern Ireland, and they say that it's a very much improved situation. Fuel is readily available. But London and the South East have been impacted, I'm afraid, especially at some of the BP sites and Shell sites around London. However, both companies are actively working the situation, and we hope we can get some fuel back into the system in the coming days.
This was the scene at a North London petrol station earlier in the week. Chaos and confusion as people lined up for hours for fuel.
And this is the same petrol station on Friday. Those long lines have gone, and that's because it's closed. It's totally out of fuel, like dozens of petrol stations all over the capital. In fact, the levels of petrol in London are at less than 20% of normal supply.
So how did it come to this? Fear of a shortage of truck drivers led to a rush on petrol pumps, draining supplies within a number of hours. Brexit, the pandemic and drivers quitting has left the UK industry 100,000 drivers short.
If there's no truck drivers, you look what happened with the fuel, right? If we all down tools, look what will happen. This country will ground to a halt within a matter of, not days, in a matter of hours.
And foreign drivers say the situation in the UK isn't improving.
No one else has these kind of problems that you're finding here. It's because of Brexit. The borders, the checkpoints, the health and safety and extra checks. This will result in a monumental loss in terms of the UK's economy.
Meanwhile, the government has put military drivers on standby to help, introduced a special visa for foreign drivers, and is trying to unblock the backlog of 40,000 truck licence applications. Will it be enough to clear the lines? These drivers desperately hope so. Nicole Johnston, CGTN, London.
And still in the country, the biggest state intervention in the UK's labour market in peacetime comes to an end this week. The government's coronavirus jobs subsidy programme, called the furlough, is winding up, but calls are growing to target help at badly affected sectors such as hospitality and travel. Here's Juliet Mann with more.
This is all, you can't go even if you want to go to. This is still pretty much red list.
Travel inquiries are coming in, but it's a voyage of recovery.
We've had our best week last week, but that's getting us back to about 40% of our normal level. It's still nowhere near enough to be able to trade profitably. We need help over the coming 6 months, certainly through the winter period, to hopefully get things back to more like normality next year.
The end of the furlough wage subsidy for pandemic-hit businesses means this firm has compromised. To save their jobs, all 6 staff have dropped to a 4-day week. The landlord's been understanding on the rent.
You can future-proof or deal with something where your income goes overnight from 100% to practically zero and remains that way for 14, 15 months. We would have been able to survive without furlough, but we would not have been able to survive with keeping the majority of our staff employed. And we would have lost people who've been with us probably 15, 20 years. So it's allowed us to keep particularly a talent pool within the industry and not lose it.
Think tanks say furlough prevented catastrophic levels of unemployment by supporting 11.6 million workers and subsidising 2.3 billion working days. The cost to the state was about $96 billion.
There's no question that this was absolutely essential. The real question now is what happens next. And it comes at a rough time for the UK economy. There's a confluence of factors, not just the end of the furlough scheme. There's a cut to universal credit around the corner. There's also the surge in gas prices and general concerns around inflation.
Retailers are rationalising. This was one of 81 UK Gap stores now closing down, affecting some 1,000 employees.
Official forecasts throughout the pandemic predicted unemployment to rise after the end of furlough. But the Bank of England says the UK labour market is hard to read. There may be record vacancies for jobs like chefs, lorry drivers, care assistants and fruit pickers. But those skill sets don't necessarily match up with those of people coming off furlough.
That's why industry groups want to see the scheme retained as a permanent option when economies hit crisis point. But market watchers have a keen eye on infection rates. If a spike necessitates another lockdown, the government will be under pressure to bring furlough back. Juliet Mann, CGTN, London.
And still in Europe, fishing communities who had voted enthusiastically for Britain to leave the EU are now finding themselves entangled in red tape, additional hygiene requirements and higher costs. Now, several of them are struggling to export their catch to Europe. CGTN's Michael Voss visited a major British fishing port at Newlyn in Cornwall in southwest England to see how they're coping with both Brexit and COVID.
Just before dawn at Newlyn Harbour, a local trawler starts unloading several tons of pilchards.
Before Britain left the European Union, these fish would go straight onto refrigerated lorries and arrive within hours at local markets in France. With 80% of all the fish caught at Newlyn going for export, there were fears that all the extra red tape and costs could kill the industry. A problem made worse by COVID.
It has been a perfect storm. We were afraid of Brexit. That was going to cause us issues with our exports, and then COVID hit and saw a marked reduction in prices. But now we have seen the prices have recovered somewhat. That doesn't mean we're out of the water, out of the storm, but I would say we're on the up.
Fish sales started to recover after the local authority provided health inspectors to help with export certificates, though the process is slower and more expensive. One of the major selling points of Brexit was that it would limit access to foreign trawlers and increase quotas for local fishermen. In the end, only minor changes took place, phased in over 5 years. Skipper Paul Corin voted for Brexit. Now he feels betrayed and has had to sell the family-owned trawler to keep the business alive.
The exports improved after Brexit with a lot of hard work from people, but the increase in quota that we were promised just didn't materialise. This was a family boat, but we had to sell to a bigger company. We just didn't have enough quota to keep the vessel running and make a profit.
So how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think we were all stabbed in the back. We were promised lots of stuff and it's not materialised and it's not going to materialise.
Boosting domestic sales is seen as another priority post-Brexit. Britain is an island nation surrounded by rich fishing waters. But apart from fish and chips, we don't eat much fish, and much of what we do is imported. A PR company was hired to rebrand some of the catches to make them more appealing. This Newlyn fishmonger also sells online, with the vast majority of his sales pre-Brexit going to export. Now Craig Tonkin believes the rebranding has helped.
So these used to be known as pilchards and now called Cornish sardines, and we sell a lot of those in the UK. This is a Megrim sole. 95% of these used to be sent to Spain, and now they've been rebranded as Cornish soles, and we sell a lot of those in the UK as well.
But for many Newlyn fishermen, exports remain their lifeblood. The worst of their problems may be over, but many are still struggling to survive. Michael Voss, CGTN, Cornwall.
Meanwhile, China is showing off some of its most advanced weapons and fighter jets at the country's largest air show. Amongst the aircraft on display is the J-16D, an electronic warfare fighter jet that's designed to jam radars and erode anti-aircraft systems. Now, China is only the second country in the world to develop this type of plane after the United States. Here's Huang Fei with details.
This is the J-16D, a bright new star in China's growing constellation of anti-access area denial weapons. It's a variant of the J-16 strike plane. D comes from the Chinese word for electronic, 电子.
This is not a plane that would go into short-range dogfights. Instead, it's designed to jam, deter, and attack the enemy's air defense system. The plane has an electronic warfare pod on each wing, and its fuselage is lined with antennas. And there are plenty of hard points under the plane to hang anti-radiation missiles.
And those typically target hostile radar. The People's Liberation Army insignia here indicates that it has been in service for the military. The craft will act as a guardian in the sky for the J-20, China's most advanced stealth fighter jet, flying in Zhuhai for the first time on domestic-made engines. KJ-500 early warning and control aircraft, also on show here, will be the eyes and ears of the entire fleet.
Experts say the J-16D is evidence of China's vastly improved electronic warfare power and shows the military's interest in developing specialized aircraft that will offer a full spectrum of air defense power.
Huang Fei, CGTN, at the Zhuhai Air Show.
Now, there are not only big planes at this show, but also lots of smaller jets used in general aviation. Well, CGTN's Wule was at the event in Zhuhai, and he looks at how general aviation is taking off in China as low-altitude airspace begins to open up.
This is a hybrid electric multi-engine plane with 4 seats. It requires less fuel and is less noisy, and it can fly for up to 5 hours at one time. Many aircraft manufacturers see increasing opportunities in this booming market.
The space open is so important for general aviation for the local market. So that's why I'm strong. I see this hint, a kind of tense that China is trying to opening our space for this low, about below 3,000 meters.
In August, China's Hunan province became the country's first trial area to open up its low-altitude space. It means more aircraft, pilots, training services, and airport management are needed.
But a lot of areas, especially for the private customer, we're always looking for a partner, building a partnership for the other, just to mention those small and medium company, to go growing together.
These aircraft can be used in lots of emerging sectors within aviation, including leisure and entertainment, short-distance transport, and emergency rescues. Data from the Civil Aviation Administration of China shows by the end of last year, the country had 339 certified general aviation airports. Many believe the market is ready to take off with more innovative policies and robust growth prospects. Wule, CGTN, Zhuhai, Guangdong Province.
And on that note, before we take a short break now, let's take a quick look at commodity markets today. Copper prices rebounding, but they were on pace to post a weekly decline of nearly 3%. Now, traders are warning that more losses are likely due to concerns over energy prices and, of course, Chinese growth. Meanwhile, oil prices falling to about $78 a barrel today. That's on the prospect that OPEC Plus producers might step up a planned increase in output in order to ease supply concerns. Crude still remained in sight of a 3-year high reached this week. Gold prices edging lower today as a resilient dollar pressured the safe haven metal, but support from a dip in U.S. bond yields and equities did help to keep the metal above that key $1,750 per ounce mark. Well, let's take a short break now. Still to come. A peek through God's window in the eastern part of South Africa's Mpumalanga province that will soon boast the highest skywalk in the world.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Now, several African nations are racing to construct special lanes and introduce bus rapid transit projects in major cities in order to help ease traffic congestion. Now, in Ethiopia, the Addis Ababa City Administration has now embarked on a multi-million-dollar project to speed up public transport. Here's CGTN's Gerum Chala with more.
Every day in Addis Ababa City, people line up waiting for transport means to arrive, and over 3 million of them rely on public transport daily. Traffic congestion has made life very difficult for many of these city residents. But now, that is becoming a thing of the past, largely due to the Addis Ababa City Administration's move to build this bus rapid transit project.
The improvement because of this lane from every angle is incredible.
This route from Sabe to Mexico, for instance, was one of the painfully congested roads before for every bus user. Now everything has changed. The benefits cannot be measured.
For Addis Ababa residents like Lakach and Wendimage, who are everyday bus users, the rapid bus lane has helped improve their commuting experience. They have managed to save their time and energy due to this new city transport service.
This is wonderful. First, no small vehicle is allowed to use this lane, as it's for public transport use only. It's even better than what taxi users experience. We bus users are reaching our destinations faster by far, so no questions about the benefits of this new lane.
Most city residents use public transport, and the opening of this lane is a strategic and well thought about move by the city administration. So now we don't face traffic jams and we are always in time for our daily jobs. People are satisfied and we would like to see it expanded to other locations too.
The new fast bus lanes with an outlay of 3.8 billion birr are being built so as to modernize the transportation system in Addis Ababa city. And so far, there are 15 of them being completed. It is more good news for bendy bus drivers like Zemetkon.
Already we have seen a difference of going for 2 courses or round trips than before, all due to the opening of this new fast bus lane. We can also drive at the maximum speed limit allowed as the road is open for us.
BRT lanes are constructed to be solely used by buses, meaning there's no traffic congestion along them. This will help the Ethiopian capital have in place swift, accessible, secure and safer public transport. Addis Ababa is modernizing and it wants to live up to its name and reputation of being the 3rd largest diplomatic center in the world, only after New York and Brussels, as it is the seat of the African Union HQ and other UN agencies, and modernizing transport services as well as expanding the city's road network remains top in the to-do list of the city's administration. Grumjara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Now, Cape Town is fast growing into South Africa's tech capital and possibly even the continent's capital. According to FDI Intelligence, a division of the Financial Times Group, the sector raked in about $88 million in foreign direct investment in 2020. Now, it's second only to Egypt for creating a thriving tech ecosystem, which enables about 40,000 jobs through 450 tech startups. While CGTN's Julie Shire takes a look at an exciting tech startup who benefited from funding from Singularity University.
The Western Cape is shaping up to be South Africa's own Silicon Valley. Hypernova has been one of the most exciting startups so far to emerge from the Stellenbosch Cape Town Tech University. Co-founder Jonathan Lund's company created a unique innovation to move satellites around in space.
You think of an engine that's pushing a satellite. Normally you think of something that's emitting gas in a sort of a little thruster, and it's got a pressure tank and a valve, and usually those systems are quite complicated and very expensive. We've completely changed that. It uses a combination of electricity that goes into a circuit and actually generates a little pulse of energy that vaporizes the metal and turns it into a very ionized hot puff of gas that then creates your thrust.
Further to that, Hypernova uses groundbreaking technology to source fuel anywhere in the galaxy.
Older propulsion systems are using these rare and exotic fuels that can only be found on Earth. And what we've done is completely decoupled that and linked it to abundant metals, which can be found and mined on Earth, but it can also be found and mined in space, and then processed and put into a rocket to be flown into space, or actually extracting that metal from the moon or from space junk or from an asteroid and turning that into a fuel source.
The hub raked up close to $90 billion in investment just in 2020. Many of the 450 companies, including Hypernova, worked with Stellenbosch University Launch Lab, an initiative for budding African entrepreneurs.
What we really look for are really smart
technical people. They could be coders, they could be cooks, they could be engineers. Jonathan came through here. He did have a space here for a while. We did some work with him on his business model, and now they're really taking off.
South Africa's tech industry is one of the few that flourished during the 18-month COVID-19 lockdown. 40,000 jobs were added in the Western Cape tech sector.
The point of all these things is to create impact, to build sustainable, profitable companies, to create jobs. If you raise your hand and say, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to build a great company, we're going to work directly with you. We're going to be the shoulder to cry on. We're going to be the strategy advice in the background.
COVID-19 has been disastrous for many industries as unemployment shot to a record 24.4%. But growth in the tech sector has been a silver lining in this battered economy. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Meanwhile, South Africa is also ramping up efforts to make the country a key tourist destination. Several popular attractions and historic locations are being either revamped or renovated to provide more memorable experiences. Well, God's Window in the eastern part of the country's Mpumalanga province will soon boast the highest skywalk in the world. Here's CGTN Sumitra Naidu with the details.
After 7 years of financial modeling, a groundbreaking ceremony was finally held to mark the official start of construction. In just over a year's time, the famous God's Window will have a new skywalk over 1 kilometers above the ground and 12 meters out.
The brief basically was that they want a skywalk at God's Window, with some restaurants and things like that. We took that basic brief and gave it a bit of a facelift. We actually decided to, instead of going halfway with this project, to actually put a world-class facility there at God's Window.
God's Window gets its name from the breathtaking view of the Lowveld that stretches over 900 meters down into an indigenous forest-clad valley, making the region one of South Africa's most popular wildlife attractions.
There's been a lot of work in terms of getting the investors to come to the fore and also engaging with the CPAs which are around this community and also our traditional leaders and the local community members, so that at the end of the day, as we are going to put this investment within their shores, they must take ownership and they must be part of this initiative.
$32 million has been invested in building the sky bridge that will offer visitors a panoramic view through a cantilevered glass walkway suspended off the edge of the cliff.
Even providing more offerings for visitors, like sky swings that will swing across the sort of edge of the cliff, absorbing those balls that people climb in water ponds, just roll around, and a curated craft market as well.
It's hoped the new development will improve tourism, support the local community and create jobs.
10% must go to our local communities. We'll then move on to them benefiting about 30%. The lifespan of the investors in this project, it is estimated to be within 27 years. Then the project will then be officially handed over to the communities of this area, which as government we are saying we need to develop our communities and make sure that we empower them.
The skywalk is expected to be completed by mid-2023. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Mpumalanga, South Africa.
Well, before we leave you today, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand continuing to gain strongly today as the country's trade surplus widened more than expected last month and as the dollar fell on global markets. Now, bumper commodity prices, especially for precious metals, which of course is a key South African export, also helped to bolster the country's terms of trade this year and of course support the rand. Meanwhile, in Nigeria, as the CBN delays the launch of the e-Naira today, the Naira currency depreciated further at the official window despite a 266% increase in dollar supply in the country. It continues to hit record lows against the US dollar at the black market, and that's despite news of Nigeria's Eurobond sales, which of course was meant to boost the nation's external reserves. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.